Science is the crawling of humanity towards the truth. The book, Quantizing Emotions, The Basic Mathematics of Psychology by Mohammad Hasan Algarhy, presents two main approaches to quantize emotions. It starts with basic and intuitive thought experiments to build up the logic used to propose these approaches. It then mentions some of the earlier techniques to measure and quantify emotions, including a brief about mathematical psychology and psychophysics. The first approach is based on the hormonal neural response to emotions and proposes a value for it, the HN value. The second approach is through the science of epigenetics. Generally, a background in physics or mathematics is not required. You can still enjoy the book as the thought experiments are built in an analogous and intuitive approach that leads to the concepts mentioned in the book. A physics or mathematics background would be a plus in a few sections of the book. The attempts proposed in this book to quantize emotions are built on previous scientific work and concepts from different science fields. The book presents a few thought experiments to build up and explain the reasons behind proposing these specific methodologies and approaches when attempting to quantize emotions. The book is opening doors for further research and scientific validations. Thought experiments and analogies have been the most successful approach humanity has used, leading to the most significant discoveries in humankind's history. Throughout history, the greatest minds have used thought experiments and analogies as tools to understand how the laws of the universe work, proposing theories, laws, and equations. Some of the most famous thought experiments are the ones that led to discovering and proposing the laws of gravity, relativity, and quantum mechanics. The key has always been asking the right questions. It's not necessarily always about finding the correct answer, but the right question is the key to opening more doors in science, philosophy, and any field of study. Isaac Newton's famous question led to the discovery of gravity. Why did the apple fall to the ground while the moon did not? The question seems quite basic and intuitive, yet a simple right question was asked, and a new era in physics started. Einstein always utilized thought experiments to understand and explain his revolutionary physical concepts, like the famous train and lightning experiment for explaining special relativity. The accelerating elevator and the person falling off the roof were some of the thought experiments used to explain general relativity. Schrödinger's cat is another thought experiment used to criticize the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics and the state of quantum superposition. Yet it is often used in theoretical discussions related to quantum mechanics interpretations. The thought experiments, methodologies, and even the whole approach to quantizing emotions, presented in the book Quantizing Emotions, The Basic Mathematics of Psychology, do not claim to confirm or present specific scientific theories. The primary intention is to open doors for potential scientific validation and discussion. This book is presenting as well what could be the potential future research in various areas of science based on the proposed approach and methodology. This is not claiming to be giving the right answers, but rather asking some questions that could be useful and inspire some new ideas and research. Even though the basic mathematics of psychology is in the book's title, it does not claim to be reinventing the wheel in that field. There is already a quite sophisticated field of mathematical psychology and psychophysics, which you can find a brief about in the book. The book aims to build on previous works from various science fields, presenting a new approach and opening the door for further research and scientific validation. Can we consider psychology and quantizing emotions a science? This question has been an ongoing debate almost since psychology started. The argument of not considering psychology as a science is mainly based on the idea that psychology is often missing experimental conditions and conclusive results. After all, how can you measure emotions or quantize them? How can you experimentally test the study of the human mind, qualities, and emotions? A widely acknowledged definition of science is that it is systematically observing a phenomenon or group of phenomena, then using those observations to develop laws and principles through developing hypotheses and experimenting with them. Relying on statistics to test a hypothesis is an acknowledged science methodology. A famous example is the Higgs boson. Particle physicists cannot directly observe the Higgs boson. Instead, they rely on statistics to know it is there. Psychology is the study of the human mind and behavior. Psychology research could demonstrate that it follows the scientific method. A widely acknowledged approach for the scientific method is 1. Observation and description of a phenomenon or group of phenomena. 2. Forming a hypothesis to explain the phenomena. 3. Make a prediction based on the hypothesis. 4. Performance of experimental tests of the predictions by several independent experiments. 5. Iterate. Use the results to make new hypotheses or predictions. Psychology research can start by observing patterns in human behavior. Psychologists usually develop a specific testable hypothesis about why that behavior happens, or they might create a scenario and see if it leads to a particular behavior. Suppose they want to find the correlation between variables that a specific event and behavior are related to. In that case, they conduct a field experiment where psychologists carefully subject in normal, uncontrolled circumstances. If they want to determine causation, whether or not a particular event triggers a behavior, they will create a rigorous, highly controlled and replicable laboratory experiment. Then they will use statistics to analyze relationships within those data to make sure the findings are reliable. The experiments are often repeated under the same conditions. Still, how can you objectively quantify or even agree on a definition of something like happiness? It can be interpreted in too many ways. It is too abstract to be accurately tested. People can define happiness differently depending on their culture, circumstances, or even the momentary conditions they are facing. So how can researchers objectively define it? Another point is that how can you reliably reproduce the results in psychology? People, their behavior, and even perception of emotions vary from one place to another, from one era to another. Even the same person's behavior and perception can change with age, location, and conditions. What psychologists mainly attempt to do is to operationalize abstract concepts like happiness or anger. They create, validate, and test a functional definition that serves as a good substitute for something abstract. For example, they might study happiness by tracking how often a person smiles or laughs. Or they can have people rate their happiness from 0 to 10. Another technique is to track the number of endorphins in the body or the neural response. An important note about psychology is that it is not looking to capture a universal human experience, because that does not exist. As mentioned earlier, people, their behavior, and even perception of emotions vary from one place to another, from one culture to another, from one era to another. And even the behavior and perception of the same person can change with age, location, and conditions. Creating general strict rules for human behavior would miss many nuances and details in different people and situations. Variables, including differences between people, cultures, eras, and ages, should be acknowledged in psychology research. What could cause skepticism is that it is difficult to separate fact from the vast amount of pseudoscience, self-help books, advice columns, and websites making false claims about psychology. Managing to follow a systematic, objective methodology with hard evidence and testable hypotheses would support psychology as a science with beneficial, measurable outcomes. Psychologists usually say everything psychological is biological, which is something we are going to see over and over again in the book. Quantizing emotions. The basic mathematics of psychology follows the scientific method and how psychologists apply it to their research. In the book Quantizing Emotions, the basic mathematics of psychology, Mohammad Hasan Algarhy proposes an approach that the physiological effects of emotions, for example, the hormonal and neural responses to emotions, could help us quantize emotions by measuring them. Algarhy proposes a process to measure and quantize them through a few thought experiments and proposed mathematical approaches. Some psychologists think that a set of ideas borrowed from quantum mechanics could help us make sense of human behavior. The notion is called quantum cognition, suggesting that quantum mechanics mathematical tools could help make human behavior more predictable. The book follows some of the quantum cognition methodologies and highlights how these methodologies could be applied.